December 8th, we are joined from, I assume, Vietnam and Tokyo today. Gap between Japan and Europe, and we're going to move towards the recommendation. So, quick recap. Gap between Japan and Europe. I've made a quick analysis of the differences between Japan and Europe, and we have been actually discussing this for, well, in depth of detail over the past few weeks. Whether or not the gaps that I've identified are actually really true, or whether these gaps actually exist or not. So, first of all, the difference between a continent and an island. We talked about this. A similarity is within basically the culture of religion and the role of Confucius in Japan. Both religion and Confucianism, they show the way how we should live. It's less of a why, but more of a how we should live, and that is a guideline. The Ten Commandments, for example, and the rules that Confucius lays out on how to become a gentleman. That is a way that we rule our life. On the other hand, Western society has the other half of the society. That's our philosophy, and the philosophy is much more focused on the why question. I think, therefore I am. I think, therefore I am, for example. It's basically the Western philosophy. What is central here, that is based on logic. You can make all kinds of premises, but what is important is that you follow the rules of logic, of consistency, of cause and effect, and you're trying to capture the essence by simplification, making it simpler and simpler and simpler, and identifying connections between the abstract elements. That is Western logic, and this is something that we cannot really find in Japan. I think there are philosophers in Japan, like Ishida, who are also engaging in existentialist questions, like, okay, how, look, for example, does the moon really exist? That's a really existentialist question, but I don't think it's mainstream in Japan. He's very important, but it's not mainstream.
What do you mean mainstream?
Mainstream is that it is not ingrained with by every individual in Japan. For example, the teachings of Nishida. I think there are very few people in Japan who are aware of these teachings and are applying them actively. But if we talk about European society, then and we talk about philosophy and we talk about logic, these things are actually maybe not, people are not aware of the origins of these ideas, but we all have them in common.
European ordinary people, they do not know Nietzsche.
They don't know Nietzsche. Well, they probably heard about him, but they don't know Nietzsche. They don't know Socrates. They don't know Aristotle, for that matter. But we've all been taught how to speak more persuasively. We've all learned how to debate, how to express your opinion. We've all learned how to create models, and these things are being taught in our school system. So even though we are not aware of the philosophers themselves, we do know what they taught us. So not exactly who, but we know what they taught us. So that has become part of our society. So we have religion, which shows us how to live, and we have philosophy that basically has taught us, has laid the foundations for our culture, and more a question of, okay, why do we exist, and how do we engage with each other, how do we communicate with each other? And that is a big gap with Japan, I believe. Japan is more based on learning the teachings of excellent scholars like Confucius and others. But what they have in common is that they show us how to live, and less about, for example, logics or more abstract ideas. They do exist, but like I said before, they have not become part of the culture. They have their lessons have been learned by only a few Japanese who took the effort to learn about Nishida, but they have not become really mainstream in Japanese society, I believe.
You said gap
Gap.
among philosophy?
Yes, I think that basically the origins of Western philosophy, of course, it's Western philosophy, so a part of it has been adopted in Japan. I mean, we cannot say that there is no logical thinking in Japan. There is no abstract thinking in Japan. Of course there is. Of course, Japanese people also use models. They also use a certain extent of abstraction. But I believe that there is much more abstraction. There is much more an analytical approach to find the truth in reality than there is in Japan. How to say that? I believe that we are easier to make choices, to omit, to take out, and to simplify than in Japan, which in Japan there is more of a tendency to keep all the complexity and keep all the elements that play a role, keep it part of your consideration. Do you understand what I mean? So last week, I think, or 2 weeks ago, you showed me a slide of a Japanese presentation. It's filled with a diagram which filled with all kinds of elements which...
No, you're talking about philosophy.
Yeah, philosophy, abstraction, critical thinking, that's basically the third...
Okay, let me simply explain that Nishida philosopher is based upon Zen, Japanese Buddhism. Okay? And Westerners is different, I understand. At that standpoint is clearly they have a gap. And but you said how to live. Zen is exactly how to live, but
yes.
How to live is how is different from European Japan. This is understanding. How is different. And you going to the temple, every young Japanese or senior Japanese going to the temple, spend 1 or 2 days, and they try to make meditation, and they try to calm down their mind, and they try to forget annoyance,
right,
and anything current world, is turmoil, everything else, forget everything else, and going back to the normal life. This is the Japanese style Zen.
Right. We talked about
this kind of thought is very much Nishida philosopher is very much influenced by Zen, and he said we can. He said absolute nothingness.
Yes.
Okay? Absolute nothingness is just nothing in your mind.
Right.
Forget everything, right? Absolute nothingness. And just we should acknowledge kind of mental situation. This is very important for the sort of thinking approach.
Right.
So this is not philosophy.
What do you achieve when you achieve absolute nothingness? Where do you get if you achieve absolute nothingness?
This is very similar to Buddhism. It's just pure heart.